Hey guys, come follow me time again. So we're in Mormon 1 through 6, which, this is the Book of Mormon. Even though the entire book's called the Book of Mormon, it's because Mormon abridged it. This is where we get to see his part of his story and his gaining the plates, writing some on the plates and abridging the plates later on, which carries on 7 through 10, I believe it is. But anyway, and then Moroni adds some stuff. It's an interesting story. These plates, I want to see these plates someday because the history and the hands they pass through. If we go back to Omni, I think it is, where they just pass quickly, and you see that again in 4th Nephi. They pass through hands quickly. So there we go. Anyway, enough about that. We're in Moroni 1, 2 to 3, and 13 to 17. Now, this whole week is really around Mormons saying, I just wish that I could persuade all to follow Christ. I just wish that I feel, like Ammon way back in Alma, in the middle of Alma, in the 30s in Alma, and he said, I wish that I were an angel and I could have the wish of my heart, as in to preach the gospel and have people believe it. And I really hope that Mormon can look at us and, there's that meme that goes around, which I always think about too, I put it together for you coherently, the least you can do is read it, or, I compiled it for you and wrote stuff, the least you can do is read it. And it's so true. Like, if you wrote a book and all your family ignored that you wrote a book, wouldn't you be like, look, at least you could read it? You don't have to like it, but could you try reading it? So I always think of that, and I'm like, that's why I'm just passionate about the Book of Mormon. It's why it was Ezra Taft Benson's talk back in 1986 in the October General Conference, the one that people reference constantly. I seem to hear it being referenced all the time. A couple of times in this last conference, actually, one from Emily Bell Freeman, and one of the 70s at least mentioned it. It seems to be mentioned all the time. It was such a pivotal talk that hit so many of us at a fundamental level of why the Book of Mormon is so important and that we should go read it. It's what inspired me to read it for the first time and really gain a testimony of it. I think I probably had a testimony, but I mean gain as in fill the bucket of testimony of the Book of Mormon. Anyway, so this whole week is more about how we can live in a world. This is what I've based this on, because the Come Follow Me manual is talking about this, so I've written around this as well. How we can follow Christ regardless of what others could do. How we can live in a world like Mormon lived in there, where everyone just willfully disobeyed. It wasn't like they'd fallen away in unbelief, or that they didn't have the opportunity to hear the gospel. These were people that could hear the gospel, that knew the things that they should be doing and willfully went against them. And that happens in today's world as well, on various spectrum of degrees. But how can we stay good? And this is where we need to embrace these lessons. So anyway, at only 10 years old, we read in verses 2 to 3, so it says in 2 to 3, and it came about the time that Ammoron had up the records unto the Lord. He came unto me, I being about 10 years of age, and I began to be learned somewhat after the manner of the learning of my people. So he's already like a smart kid. Ammoron said unto me, I perceive that thou art a sober child, and thou art quick to observe. So he had perception, he had observation, he had these gifts already, and he was already learning how to use them. And in the first part of 3, he talks about, therefore, when you're about 20 and 4 years old, I would that you should remember the things that you have observed concerning this people. So you're going to need to get a bit older. When you go into the land of Antim, unto a hill which could be called Shim, and there I've deposited unto the Lord all the sacred engravings concerning this people. Now, the hill that they call Shim is better known later here because it's a different people, or a different geographic area. He calls it the hill Cumorah, which we know from the Doctrine and Covenants when Moroni comes and he takes it back to Cumorah. So there's different places where it gets deposited here for safety. I don't know that they were exactly the same places. I think they're different, and I think it does say they're different. I'm trying to remember. I don't know everything about the Book of Mormon here. I'm just a Sunday school teacher trying to teach you online. But anyway, okay. So at 10 years old, Mormon was markedly different from his people. And what differences do you see? What do you think of you at 10 years old? Were you perceptive and quick to observe, and did you use your spiritual gifts? And I'm like, I think at that age we're starting to develop them. So think about when you were 10 and what differences do you see from his people as to how he was even at 10? And what qualities did he have that you'd like more of? What other qualities do you discover in these chapters that you'd like more of? And maybe you could discuss it with your family as to, who wants to be more like Mormon was. Now at 15, this is in verse 15, he was visited by the Lord and told, in an ugly world, you can too experience this. And I love 15, so let's just read 15. 13 through 17 is covered though, but 15, just for our time's sake, says, and I being 15 years of age and being somewhat of a sober mind, therefore I was visited of the Lord and tasted and knew the goodness of Jesus. We can have that too. He's in an ugly world. If we want that, we can have that as well, and we can experience that. So how do you invite the Lord's visitation into your daily life? How do you bring that into your daily life? There's always prayer in the morning, and there's living in a way that invites him to be around, and sometimes you see him more than others, but it's that watching and looking and asking and having those constant conversations, and that relationship with him goes back to relationship again, and being of that sober mind. It doesn't mean that you don't crack a joke or that you can't have fun and smile. It doesn't mean you have to be like boring all the time. No, absolutely not. It means that you're clear-thoughted, like you're clearly thinking and you have clear focus. You're not highly distracted. It's pretty much like if you're an ADHD person, this would be really hard to have. You'd have to really try to focus here, but you could still do it. And I know people that are ADHD and do very, very well at this and serve missions and serve as state presidents and have this focus and can do that. But it takes effort. It takes effort for all of us. Probably a little more for them, but it does take effort. And what kind of things would you like to would you do to remain among this people and remain Christ-like? So what kind of things would you do in your daily life? If you had to stay with this people and you wanted to remain Christ-like, what would you do? Because they're so against that way of living. It would be really, really hard. It'd be like living in a really, really rough neighborhood with neighbors that had parties all day long and sold drugs and did all sorts of things. You just got to almost wrap your world in cotton wool a little bit. So you still acknowledge that that's there, but you choose to live this way. Anyway, and how do you do this in today's world? How do you do this in today's world? How do you do it? I do it by, we used to live in a really, really rough neighborhood, and I would just have to, just have it over there somewhere and not think about it. You'd get woken up some nights with gunshots, or there'd be a big fight, and I had noise control. Back before we had cell phones, I had noise control as my number one dial. So I'd pick it up in the middle of the night. And there's a party again at this address, because it was always the same house. There were break-ins and stuff got stolen all the time, and it's so hard. Now that we're in a nicer neighborhood, I know that stuff still exists, but it's less obvious. It's a lot quieter, it's a lot better. So how do you do that in today's world? I'd like to know what you do, because we could all learn from each other on how do we do this. Now, one of the biggest things I do to remain Christ-like among this ugly world is to read scriptures every day, is to read the Book of Mormon. Even if it's just a verse a day or a line a day, or even if I don't have them with me, because sometimes I'm traveling and I don't have them right with me here. They might be in my suitcase or something. I've remembered some from Scripture Mastery, and I can think about them, and it helps focus me. I can think about church hymns that are based on these scriptures, and that helps focus me. So that's one of those things. I'm not perfect at it by far. So anyway, this has been a really long one, so sorry about that. But we're going to go over to Mormon chapter 2 and look at, and some of 3, and look at other ways that you can follow Christ regardless of what others do. I'll see you there.